The pounding on the door started at 2:17 a.m. Not knocking, pounding, the kind that shook the frame and woke every neighbor on the floor. "Open the door, Lily! I know you're in there!" Lily Chen pressed her back against the wall of her tiny apartment, phone clutched in shaking hands, trying to decide if she should call 911 or just stay silent and hope he'd go away. "We need to talk! Stop ignoring me, Lily!" The voice belonged to Brandon Wells, her ex-boyfriend. The man she'd broken up with 3 months ago after 18 months of gradually escalating control, jealousy, and emotional abuse that had nearly destroyed her sense of self. She'd been careful when she left, changed her phone number, moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood, Washington Heights instead of the Upper West Side, far enough that she thought he'd never find her, told only her closest friends where she was living, people she trusted completely. Somehow, he'd found her anyway. "I'm not leaving until you open this door!" Brandon's voice was slurred, drunk, which made him more unpredictable, more dangerous. "You can't just throw away what we had. You owe me a conversation." Lily looked at her phone. She should call the police. She knew that. But she also knew how these calls went. They'd show up, Brandon would be charming and apologetic, claim it was a misunderstanding, promise to leave. The cops would tell him to go home and sleep it off. He'd leave for tonight and come back tomorrow or next week or whenever he decided she owed him another conversation. "Lily, open this fucking door!" A different voice cut through the hallway. Deeper, calmer, carrying authority that made the pounding stop immediately. "It's 2 a.m. You're drunk. You're disturbing the entire floor. Leave now." Lily moved to her peephole carefully, trying not to make noise. In the hallway, Brandon stood outside her door, tall, athletic, wearing the expensive casual clothes he thought made him look sophisticated. His face was flushed from alcohol and anger. And between Brandon and Lily's door stood her neighbor from across the hall, the one she'd only seen a handful of times in the months since she'd moved in, the one who kept odd hours, who had serious-looking men visiting at strange times, who moved with the kind of quiet confidence that suggested he was used to being in charge. He was maybe 50, with iron gray hair and a face that looked like it had seen everything and been unimpressed by most of it. Even at 2 a.m., even in jeans and a t-shirt, he carried himself like someone you didn't argue with. "This is none of your business, old man," Brandon said, trying to sound tough and failing. "This is between me and my girlfriend." "She's not your girlfriend, and you're making it my business by waking me up." The neighbor's voice stayed level. "Leave while you still can." "Or what? You'll call the cops?" "Go ahead. Lily and I are just having a domestic disagreement." "I'm not calling the cops." The neighbor stepped closer to Brandon. He was shorter than Brandon, older than Brandon, but something about his posture made Brandon take a step back. "I'm giving you a choice. Walk away now, or I remove you from this building in a way you won't enjoy. Choose quickly." Brandon hesitated. He was used to intimidating women. Lily had learned that over 18 months. He was not used to men who looked at him with eyes that had seen actual violence and were completely unafraid. "This isn't over," Brandon said, trying to save face. "Lily, you can't hide from me forever." "Wrong building for hiding," the neighbor said quietly. "Wrong floor, wrong night. Leave." Brandon left. Lily heard his footsteps receding down the hallway, heard the elevator ding, heard silence return. She slumped against her door, heart still pounding. A knock came, gentle this time. "Ms. Chen? It's your neighbor from 4C, Dominic Russo. Are you all right?" Lily opened the door a crack, keeping the chain lock engaged. Up close, Dominic Russo looked less like someone who just confronted her drunk ex and more like a concerned neighbor checking on her safety. "I'm fine," Lily said, voice shaking slightly. "Thank you for making him leave." "He'll come back," Dominic said matter-of-factly. "Men like that always do, especially after they've been drinking and embarrassed themselves." "I know. Do you have a restraining order?" "No. He's never actually hurt me physically. He just controls everything, monitors my phone, shows up places I didn't tell him I'd be, makes me account for every minute. He's never hit me, so the police say there's nothing they can do." Dominic's expression darkened slightly. "Abuse doesn't require bruises to be real." "I know that. The police don't seem to." "The police have limited tools," Dominic said. "I don't." He pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it through the gap in the door. "If he comes back, when he comes back, you call me. Day or night, I'm usually awake." Lily took the card. It was simple. Dominic Russo, a phone number, nothing else. Why would you help me? She asked. You don't know me. I know men like your ex, and I know women who've been destroyed by them because no one intervened. His voice carried something, grief maybe, or old anger. I'm intervening, if you'll let me. After he left, Lily stood in her apartment holding the business card, wondering who Dominic Russo actually was, and whether she'd just made the best decision of her life or walked into something she didn't understand. What would you have done? Would you have accepted help from a powerful stranger or tried to handle your ex alone? The next morning, Lily did what she probably should have done immediately. She Googled Dominic Russo, New York. The results were complicated. Dominic Russo, 52, owns several businesses in New York. Construction, waste management, commercial, real estate, all appeared legitimate on paper, but the articles about him used words like alleged and suspected and connected to organized crime. There were photos from charity events where he stood next to politicians and business leaders. There were articles about his company winning major city contracts, and there were investigative pieces suggesting he was the current head of the Russo crime family, one of New York's 5 major organized crime organizations. No arrests, no convictions, just a reputation that followed him like a shadow. Lily's neighbor was allegedly a mafia boss, and he'd offered to help her with Brandon. She should probably stay as far away from Dominic Russo as possible. She should handle Brandon through legal channels. She should not accept help from someone connected to organized crime. That's what she was telling herself when Brandon called her office that afternoon. She didn't know how he'd gotten her work number. She'd been careful not to list her employer anywhere public. But Brandon had always been good at finding information she didn't want him to have. We need to talk, he said when she answered. No greeting, no apology for last night. Just demand. I'm coming to your office at 5 p.m. Be ready. Brandon, we're done. I've told you that. Multiple times. Stop calling me. You don't get to decide when we're done. I decide. 5 p.m., Lily. Don't make me come find you. He hung up. Lily sat at her desk in the advertising agency, where she worked as a junior copywriter, trying not to panic. Brandon showing up at her workplace would be humiliating and potentially dangerous. Her boss already questioned her professionalism after Brandon had called the office 6 times last month. She looked at the business card sitting in her wallet. Dominic Russo's number. She pulled out her personal phone and typed a text. This is Lily Chen from 4D. My ex called. He's coming to my office at 5 p.m. I don't know what to do. The response came in under a minute. What's the address? Lily sent it. I'll handle it. Stay inside the building until I text you it's clear. At 4:45 p.m., Lily stood in the lobby of her office building, watching through the glass doors. Brandon was already outside, leaning against a car she didn't recognize, checking his phone, waiting. At 4:52 p.m., a black SUV pulled up. Dominic Russo got out, along with 2 other men who looked like they'd been hired specifically to intimidate people. Lily couldn't hear the conversation from inside the building, but she could see it. Dominic approached Brandon. Words were exchanged. Brandon's body language went from confident to defensive to something like fear. The conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes. Then Brandon got in his car and drove away. Lily's phone buzzed. It's handled. He won't bother you at work again. When Lily got home that evening, she knocked on Dominic's door. He answered in reading glasses and a cardigan, looking less like a mafia boss. Would be considered a personal insult to me. And that insulting me has consequences he wouldn't enjoy. That's it? You just told him to leave me alone? I told him in a way that made him understand I was serious. Dominic removed his reading glasses. Brandon Wells is a bully. Bullies are fundamentally cowards. When confronted by someone more powerful, they fold. But what if he doesn't? What if he comes back? Then I escalate. But I don't think he will. I showed him documentation of every time he's contacted you in the past 3 months. Calls, texts, showing up at locations. I explained that this constitutes stalking under New York law. I also mentioned that I have friends in the DA's office who would be very interested in pursuing charges. How did you get documentation of... I didn't give you that information. Dominic's expression didn't change. I have resources most people don't. When your ex showed up drunk at 2 a.m., I made calls. By this morning, I had a complete picture of his harassment pattern. You had me investigated? I had your situation investigated. There's a difference. He seemed untroubled by her reaction. If I'm going to protect someone, I need to understand what I'm protecting them from. Lily should have been angry, should have felt violated, but mostly she felt relieved that someone finally understood the full scope of what Brandon had been doing. The constant calls from different numbers, the showing up at her gym, her favorite coffee shop, her friends' apartments. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for making him leave. Both times." "You're welcome. But Lily, I need you to understand something. I'm offering protection, not friendship. I'm someone you call when you're in danger, not someone you have dinner with. The less you know about my life, the safer." "You are." "I Googled you." "I assumed you would." "Then you know what people say about me. Are they true? The things they say?" Dominic considered the question. "Some are, some aren't. What matters is that I can keep Brandon Wells away from you in ways the police can't. If you're comfortable accepting that help despite its source, call me when you need me. If you're not comfortable, I understand. But either way, you're my neighbor, and I protect my neighbors." For 2 weeks, Lily didn't hear from Brandon. No calls, no texts, no appearances outside her building. It was the first peace she'd had in months. She started to believe it might actually be over. Then on a Tuesday evening, she came home from work to find her apartment door ajar. Not broken, not forced, just unlocked and slightly open. Lily's hands went cold. She backed away from the door and knocked on Dominic's apartment across the hall. He answered immediately, still in a suit from whatever business he'd, and pushed her door open wider, looking, and pushed her door open wider, looking inside without entering. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "I need someone at my building. Now. Apartment 4, D, possible break-in." To Lily, "Don't go in yet." 2 men arrived within 10 minutes, both professional, both moving like security rather than criminals. They swept Lily's apartment while Dominic waited in the hallway with her. "Clear," one of them reported. But someone was definitely here. Things are moved, drawers opened, bathroom cabinet disturbed. Lily followed them inside, her stomach sinking. Her apartment looked almost normal. Nothing obviously broken or stolen. But things were wrong. Her underwear drawer was slightly open. Her bathroom medicine cabinet had been rearranged. Her desk drawers weren't quite closed all the way. Someone had been through her. Things, touching them, invading her space in the most intimate way possible. "Brandon," Lily whispered. "He has a key. From when we were together. I forgot. I never asked for it back." Dominic's voice went very quiet. "He has a key to your apartment. I forgot about it. We broke up 3 months ago. I didn't think. Call your landlord. Have the locks changed tonight. If they won't do it tonight, I'll have someone do it in the next hour." Dominic pulled out his phone again, this time showing her a photo. "Is this Brandon?" It was a security camera photo from the building's entrance. Brandon entering the building 4 hours ago, looking around nervously, heading toward the elevators. "How did you get this?" "I installed additional security cameras after the first incident. Your building's existing cameras are inadequate." Dominic's jaw was tight. "He entered your apartment at 3:47 p.m. and left at 4:12 p.m., 25 minutes inside your home without permission. That's breaking and entering, right? The police can arrest him for that?" "They can. They probably won't. He'll claim he forgot to return the key, wanted to retrieve something he'd left behind, didn't mean any harm. First offense, good lawyer. He'll get a slap on the wrist. So he gets away with it again. Through legal channels, yes." Dominic looked at her. "Through my channels, no." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm going to have a more direct conversation with Brandon Wells, one that makes it very clear that entering your home was the worst decision he's made." "I don't want you to hurt him?" "I'm not going to hurt him. I'm going to educate him about consequences." Dominic's voice was calm but carried something underneath that made Lily believe him completely. "By tomorrow, he'll understand that you are untouchable, and the consequences of touching you anyway." Lily thought about Brandon going through her underwear drawer, her bathroom, her private space, the violation of it. "Okay," she said, "educate him." Lily never learned exactly what Dominic said to Brandon Wells. What she did learn was that Brandon filed a police report the next day, claiming he'd been threatened by organized crime figures and requesting protection. The police apparently told him that if he'd stop harassing his ex-girlfriend and breaking into her apartment, he'd have nothing to worry about. Brandon's parents called Lily 3 days later. They were apologetic, embarrassed, and very clear. Brandon was moving back to Ohio to live with them. He'd agreed to therapy. He would not be contacting Lily ever again. "What happened?" Lily asked Dominic when she told him about the call. "What did you say to make him leave the state?" "I showed him evidence of his stalking, documentation that would stand up in court if needed. I explained that I'd provided this evidence to several people, and if anything happened to you, those people would ensure Brandon was investigated thoroughly. Dominic sat in his armchair, looking perfectly relaxed. I also explained that you lived in a building where I had influence, worked in a neighborhood where I had connections, and existed in a city where I had resources, and that those resources would make his life very uncomfortable if he continued harassing you. You threatened him. I informed him of reality. Whether that's a threat depends on your perspective. His parents sounded terrified. I may have mentioned to his father, who's a partner at a corporate law firm, that Brandon's behavior constituted several felonies, and that I had friends at the New York Times who might find it interesting that a major law firm's partner had a son engaging in criminal stalking. Sometimes professional reputation is more motivating than personal safety. Lily sat on Dominic's couch, processing this. You destroyed his whole life. I gave him a choice, stop stalking you or face consequences. He chose to stop. His life is fine. He's just living it in Ohio now instead of New York. Thank you, Lily said quietly, for making him go away, for making me safe. You're welcome. But Lily, I need to ask you something. Okay. What are you going to do now that you're actually safe? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? I've helped 3 women in situations like yours over the years. 2 of them spent their new freedom just waiting for the next threat. They never actually lived, just survived in a slightly safer way. Dominic looked at her seriously. Don't do that. Brandon is gone. Build something. Be someone. Don't let him have stolen more than the 18 months he already took. Lily thought about that. For 3 months since leaving Brandon, she'd been in survival mode, working, hiding, existing, not building, not becoming. I don't know what I'd build, she admitted. Brandon spent 18 months telling me I wasn't smart enough, talented enough, interesting enough. I know that was abuse. I know it wasn't true, but I don't remember who I was before him. Then find out, Dominic said simply. You have time now. Use it. Over the next 6 months, Lily rebuilt herself piece by piece. She started therapy, real therapy, with someone who specialized in emotional abuse recovery. She worked through the damage Brandon had done to her sense of self. She also started writing again. In college, before Brandon, she'd written short stories. He'd called them childish, a waste of time, evidence that she wasn't serious about her career. She'd stopped writing within 3 months of dating him. Now she started again. Personal essays about recovering from emotional abuse. Fiction exploring themes of control and freedom. Poetry that was probably terrible but felt cathartic to write. She submitted a personal essay to an online magazine that focused on women's stories. They published it. Then they asked for more. Within 8 months, Lily had a small but growing portfolio of published work. Within a year, she'd quit her copywriting job to freelance write full-time, making more money doing work she actually cared about. And through all of it, Dominic Russo was across the hall. Not intrusive, not demanding, just present. He remembered to ask how her writing was going. He accepted package deliveries when she wasn't home. He made sure the building's security cameras stayed functional. They had coffee sometimes in the building's courtyard, always during daylight, always appropriate. Lily learned small things about him. That he'd been married once, years ago. That his wife had died of cancer. That he had no children but had been guardian to his sister's kids after she'd been killed in a car accident. She learned that he ran legitimate businesses, but operated by codes that weren't quite legal. That he had power and used it carefully. That he protected people he considered under his care with the kind of fierce loyalty that made men like Brandon run back to Ohio. She also learned that the rumors about him were partly true. He was connected to organized crime, not as violently as some articles suggested, but more than he'd probably admit in any legal setting. Lily found she didn't care as much as she should have. One evening, 2 years after the night Brandon had pounded on her door, Lily knocked on Dominic's apartment with a bottle of wine and a question. I got offered a book deal, she told him. A memoir about recovering from emotional abuse. A publisher read my essays and wants me to expand them. Dominic smiled, a rare, genuine expression. That's excellent. Congratulations. I wanted to ask your permission for something. I want to write about you. Not using your real name, not with identifying details. But the truth is, you're part of my recovery story. The neighbor who protected me when I couldn't protect myself. I want to include that. As long as you don't use my name or describe me accurately enough to identify me, write whatever helps you tell your story, Dominic said. But Lily, I'm not the hero of your story. You are. I just made sure you had the space to become one. You're wrong about that. You're absolutely the hero. You're just the kind of hero who doesn't want credit. Dominic poured them both wine. Tell me about the book. What's it about beyond the obvious? Lily explained her vision, not just a story about leaving an abusive relationship, but about rebuilding identity after someone tried to destroy it, about finding safety in unexpected places, about protection coming from sources you didn't expect. Are you going to write about what I actually do? Dominic asked. The less legal parts? I'm going to write about a powerful neighbor who helped me when the legal system couldn't. Readers can draw their own conclusions about what that means. Fair enough. They sat in his apartment, drinking wine, talking about books and writing, and the strange paths life takes. And Lily realized that Dominic had become her friend, not in spite of his complicated profession, but because of the character underneath it. He was someone who protected people, who saw someone in danger, and decided that helping mattered more than convenience, who used his power for purposes the law would question, but ethics would support. 2 years ago, Lily had been cowering behind her door while Brandon pounded on it, terrified and alone. Now she was a published writer with a book deal, living without fear, building a life she'd designed herself. And across the hall was the man who'd made that possible, not by solving all her problems, but by giving her the safety to solve them herself. Thank you, Lily said, for everything, for protecting me, for encouraging me to build something, for being exactly the neighbor I needed. You're welcome. And Lily, when the book comes out, I'd like a signed copy. With or without the parts about the scary neighbor who makes ex-boyfriends move to Ohio? With, definitely with. Dominic's eyes held quiet amusement. Every good story needs someone who makes the villains disappear. 3 years after Brandon had pounded on her door at 2 a.m., Lily's memoir was published. It became a bestseller, not a massive one, but successful enough that she was invited to speak at events about recovering from emotional abuse. The chapter about Dominic, carefully anonymized, described only as a powerful neighbor who understood that legal protection and actual protection aren't always the same thing, resonated with readers who'd experienced the same frustration Lily had. The same cycle of restraining orders that didn't work, police who couldn't help until actual violence occurred, systems designed to respond after harm rather than prevent it. Lily received hundreds of messages from women who'd had their own Dominic, someone who'd stepped in when the system failed, and hundreds more from women who wished they'd had someone like that. She also started a foundation, small at first, just her and a lawyer and a website, focused on practical protection for abuse survivors. Not counseling or therapy, important as those were, but concrete safety resources, security cameras, lock changes, emergency relocation funds, self-defense training, legal advocacy, and sometimes, when necessary, connections to people who could have direct conversations with abusive exes who wouldn't respond to legal warnings. Lily was very careful about that last part, very discreet. But she'd learned from Dominic that sometimes helping people required operating in gray areas the law didn't cover. One evening, a woman contacted Lily's foundation with a familiar story. Abusive ex, restraining order that didn't work, police who said there was nothing they could do, fear that was destroying her ability to function. Lily called Dominic. I have a situation, she said. A woman being stalked by her ex. Sounds a lot like my situation 3 years ago. I think she needs someone to have a direct conversation with him. Give me the details, Dominic said. Within a week, the woman's ex had stopped calling, stopped showing up at her workplace, stopped posting about her on social media, moved to a different state, and blocked her on every platform. The woman called Lily crying with relief. I don't know what you did or who you know, but thank you. I can breathe again. Lily didn't explain what she'd done or who she knew. She just offered resources for therapy and safety planning and rebuilding. And across the hall, Dominic Russo continued doing what he'd done for years, using power that came from complicated sources to protect people who'd slipped through the cracks of legal protection. It wasn't the way the system was supposed to work, but it worked when the system didn't. One evening, 5 years after that, 2 a.m. pounding on her door, Lily and Dominic sat in the building's courtyard sharing coffee and watching the sunset. My publisher wants a sequel, Lily said. Stories from other women who've escaped abusive relationships. Anthology format. I'm thinking of including the woman we helped last month, with her permission, obviously, and anonymized. That's good work, Dominic said. Important work. It's work I learned from you. Protection isn't always legal. Help doesn't always come from official sources. Sometimes the people who save you are the ones everyone says you should be afraid of. Dominic was quiet for a moment. I'm not sure I'd put it quite that way in your book. Lily laughed. Don't worry. I'll use more subtle language. But Dominic, I want you to know something. You changed my life, not just by protecting me from Brandon, but by showing me that power could be used to help instead of harm. That scared me at first. Now it inspires me. I'm glad I could help. But Lily, you did the hard part. I just made sure you had the space to do it. You keep saying that, but creating that space was everything. Without it, I'd still be hiding from Brandon or back with him or... She stopped. I don't like thinking about where I'd be without you. Then don't think about it. Think about where you are, what you've built. The women you're helping build their own lives. Lily looked at this man, this mafia boss, this protector, this unlikely friend who'd given her safety when she needed it most and encouragement to become who she was meant to be. For the record, she said, you're absolutely the hero of my story, even if you don't want to be. Heroes are for fiction, Dominic said. I'm just a neighbor who made sure a drunk idiot stopped pounding on your door at 2 a.m. You're the neighbor who saved my life. You saved your life. I just made sure Brandon couldn't end it. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset over a city where protection came from unexpected sources and help arrived from complicated people. And Lily thought about all the women she'd helped through her foundation, all the direct conversations Dominic had facilitated, all the lives that were safer because someone powerful had decided that helping mattered more than staying neutral. It wasn't the story people told about redemption or recovery. It didn't fit the narrative of official channels and legal solutions, but it was real, and it worked. And for Lily and dozens of women like her, that was enough.